Imagine you're walking into a negotiation room. You know the person across the table has been described by your own country's president as rude, excessive, over the top, and irrational. You also know that two of your allies have already walked out of the same room with a deal. First was Japan. They agreed to put up $550 billion of their own government's money.
Right.
The terms were simple. If the investment makes a profit, America takes 90%. If it loses money, Japan takes 100% of the loss. And they signed it.
Wow.
Thinking the European Union, they were offered a similar deal, but their final agreement looked completely different. It simply states that European companies are expected to invest. There's no government guarantee.
Okay.
If the investments don't happen, the EU isn't on the hook for a single euro. Now it's your turn. You represent South Korea. You're being asked for $350 billion. The negotiator slides a contract across the table. It's the Japan model. What do you do?
That's quite the setup.
That opening scenario, it's not just hypothetical. It's the incredibly high-stakes reality facing South Korea right now, with billions of dollars and, well, a pivotal alliance hanging in the balance.
Absolutely.
We're embarking on a deep dive today that will pull back the curtain on three crucial interconnected aspects of this complex situation.
Okay.
First, we're going to dissect the fundamental differences in negotiation strategies employed by Japan, the European Union, and South Korea, particularly scrutinizing who actually bears the investment risk in these colossal agreements.
That's key, the risk part.
Then we'll pivot to explore the immense domestic constitutional and fiscal challenges South Korea confronts when considering such a massive government-backed financial pledge.
Yeah, the internal picture is critical.
And finally, we'll uncover a critical, yet often overlooked, human element. Why securing specific visa quotas for skilled Korean personnel isn't just a detail, but a non-negotiable prerequisite for these multi-billion-dollar projects to even succeed on American soil.
What's truly fascinating here is how this isn't simply a discussion about trade figures or investment commitments. It's really a compelling confluence of global politics, deeply entrenched national sovereignty, intricate economic strategy, and even the very real daily realities of the individuals and companies caught within this geopolitical tug-of-war.
Yeah.
To truly grasp the gravity of South Korea's dilemma and indeed the intricate dance of international relations in our modern world, we absolutely need to understand these interconnected layers. It's far more than just what makes headlines, you know.
Exactly. The scenario we just painted vividly underscores a stark contrast in how powerful nations approach these immense investment commitments. It's not simply about the headline-grabbing dollar amount.
No, not at all.
But about the critical fine print of who ultimately takes on the financial risk and responsibility. So let's begin by thoroughly comparing the Japan model and the EU model, the two very different paths that South Korea is currently being pressed to choose between.
Precisely. When we look at Japan's experience, it really does stand out as what we might call the heavy burden model.
Heavy burden, okay.
At its core, the agreement involved an astonishing $550 billion investment. But the absolutely critical distinction, the one that makes all the difference, was that the Japanese government explicitly became the direct subject of this commitment.
The government itself, not companies.
Exactly. This wasn't merely facilitating private investment. This was the government itself signing on the dotted line.
A $550 billion government commitment is an enormous sum, almost unfathomable. But the true nature of that commitment lies in its specific terms. What made it such a heavy burden, as you called it?
Indeed, the terms were incredibly specific and, well, from Japan's perspective, undeniably one-sided. The agreement effectively handed the U.S. the power to dictate the fund's operation and, crucially, the selection of projects.
So the U.S. calls the shots on where the money goes.
Pretty much. Imagine a Japanese government putting up vast sums, but having limited say in where and how that money was ultimately deployed. For any profits generated, the split was 50-50 until the principal was recovered. But after that, a staggering 90% of the profits flowed directly to the U.S., leaving Japan with a mere tenth.
90% to the U.S.
90%. And here's the truly heavy burden, the almost unbelievable part. Japan's government bore 100% of the losses if projects failed.
100% of the loss.
100%.
Yeah.
It was a deal where the upside for Japan was minimal, almost negligible, and the downside was absolute.
Wow.
The profound insight here, and one that many observers often overlook, is the extent to which a nation like Japan, despite its significant economic power, would strategically subordinate immediate financial gain to what it perceived as critical geopolitical alliance maintenance.
So it's more about the alliance than the money.
Arguably, yes. This isn't just a bad deal in a transactional sense. It's a profound statement on their national security imperatives, likely viewed as a bulwark against rising regional powers or maybe a necessary cost for maintaining a crucial strategic partnership.
That really lays bare the financial imbalance.
Yeah.
But beyond the numbers on a contract, what does a commitment like that actually look like on the ground? How does a government, even a powerful one like Japan's, make good on such an immense promise when that kind of capital isn't just sitting idle in a national vault?
That's a great question. To truly understand it, let's step into a hypothetical scenario. Picture Mr. Tanaka, a diligent mid-level manager at Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry.
Okay, Mr. Tanaka at MITI.
Right. This isn't the prime minister making grand public pronouncements. Mr. Tanaka is the person whose job it becomes to translate those high-level commitments into concrete reality.
Right, the implementation guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After the prime minister's public pledge of $550 billion, Mr. Tanaka's life for the next 6 months transforms into what he grimly calls dialing for dollars.
Dialing for dollars.
Yeah. He spends his entire workday on the phone, reaching out to executives at the country's largest private companies. Think Toyota, Panasonic, Sony, and even smaller cutting-edge tech firms.
So he's leaning on the private sector.
Yeah. He has to. He can't issue direct commands. Japan operates on a different model than a command economy. But he can strongly encourage. He'll talk passionately about patriotic duty, the unbreakable bond of the alliance with the United States, and subtly hint at the potential for favorable government contracts down the road, or perhaps less regulatory scrutiny if these companies cooperate with the national directive.
So carrots and sticks, but mostly encouragement.
Sort of. But underneath his calm, polite demeanor, Mr. Tanaka feels a constant knot in his stomach. He knows he's effectively pushing these private companies to make investment decisions that might not align with their immediate optimal business interests or market logic.
Right, forcing their hand based on politics, not business sense.
Precisely. He's asking them to potentially sacrifice market-driven strategies for a geopolitical imperative. This highlights the immense, often unseen internal pressure the Japan model places on the private industry.
Ah, okay.
It can lead to a significant misallocation of private resources, driven more by political wins and diplomatic needs than by sound market-based rationale.
I see.
It's a national strategy that places a very heavy, almost invisible burden on individual companies, transforming what should be private sector decisions into quasi-governmental directives. This distinction is crucial, and it's a facet of these deals that the public rarely gets to see.
That's a truly revealing insight into the hidden pressures within the Japanese system. In stark contrast, the European Union's deal, which outlined an expected $600 billion investment by 2028, sounds fundamentally different on the surface. How did that model manage to diverge so significantly?
It's a truly pivotal divergence. Crucially, the EU's basic agreement explicitly states that European companies are expected to invest, not the EU itself, nor its member state governments.
Companies, not governments. That's the key phrase.
Exactly. This is a fundamental, almost philosophical difference in approach. It means there is no direct government guarantee, no blanket liability for the EU or its constituent nations if these private sector investments don't actually materialize.
So the EU isn't on the hook financially if Bosch or Siemens decides not to invest.
Correct. The onus, therefore, rests squarely on the private sector, guided by market forces and their own corporate strategies, rather than by direct government directives or financial backing.
That definitely seems like a much safer and more advantageous position for the EU compared to Japan's arrangement. But was this deal universally hailed as a strategic triumph or a win for Europe?
Far from it, unfortunately. This deal has been rightly characterized as a capitulation and humiliation for Europe by a number of prominent critics within the continent.
Capitulation and humiliation, strong words. Why?
Well, economically, it's widely perceived as a damaging, largely one-way street. EU exporters are facing expectations of losing significant U.S. market access, while the EU's own domestic market is simultaneously hit by favored U.S. competition.
So bad for EU businesses.
For many, yes. Core European industrial sectors, such as pharmaceuticals and the critical steel and aluminum industries, were effectively left by the wayside, receiving little to no protection or favorable terms. The balance of economic benefit in this agreement heavily tilts in the U.S.'s favor, particularly in sectors like consumer goods, food and drink, and agriculture. What's more, these tariffs and disadvantages tend to stick, causing long-term structural damage to European industries.
And other concessions.
Yes, the EU even made a significant concession, giving up its right to respond to future U.S. pressures, such as potential duties on digital services or network fees.
So they tied their own hands for the future.
In a way, yes. Furthermore, the pledges made by high-profile figures like Ursula von der Leyen were widely seen as being made without a clear, consolidated mandate from member states, especially problematic given Europe's existing net investment outflows.
Lack of mandate is a big deal in the EU.
It is. So while it did strategically avoid direct government liability, it certainly came with its own set of very significant economic costs and widespread political criticisms from within Europe.
So even though the EU model sidestepped the direct government liability that Japan embraced, it clearly came with its own substantial set of criticisms and significant economic costs. Sounds like a deeply flawed and contentious arrangement for them.
Absolutely. And the complexities don't end there. This deal is truly an unstable interim accord, meaning it's not a fully inked, legally binding agreement that has passed all necessary legislative hurdles.
Unstable, meaning it could fall apart.
Potentially. Washington and Brussels are already reportedly disagreeing on its fundamental interpretation, signaling deep structural issues. It still needs to be translated into an international agreement and subsequently into EU law, a process that requires approval from all 27 EU member state governments, each with its own domestic political considerations.
A nightmare to coordinate.
And critically, the European Parliament. The Parliament has already voiced strong criticism, viewing it as asymmetry set in stone and a misery, which clearly indicates the uphill battle ahead for its full ratification.
So not exactly a done deal then.
Not by a long shot. So it's not just imperfect or criticized. It's an ongoing, highly contentious, and potentially unstable process within Europe itself, reflecting a deep dissatisfaction with the terms.
Given these two profoundly contrasting precedents, Japan's heavy government burden and the EU's criticized corporate-led but unstable agreement, South Korea is very clearly stating its refusal to adopt the Japan model. We've heard reports of President Lee Jae-myung using incredibly direct language to describe the U.S. negotiation tactics. For South Korea, this isn't simply a matter of strategic preference. It sounds like an absolute necessity.
Indeed, the South Korean government's position on this is unyielding and non-negotiable. The investment subject must be Korean companies, operating under their own corporate prerogatives, not the South Korean government itself.
Companies, not the state. Back to that key distinction.
Exactly. This stance isn't born of mere diplomatic posturing. It's a deep-seated necessity rooted firmly in their domestic realities and their intricate constitutional framework. This forms a core aspect of their comparative negotiation strategy.
So for you, what are the fundamental reasons South Korea must insist on the EU model, safeguarding corporate autonomy, rather than inadvertently stepping into the same kind of government-backed liability that Japan did? What makes that Japan model utterly unworkable for Seoul?
Well, the reasons are multifaceted, but they really coalesce around fiscal capacity and constitutional constraints.
Okay, fiscal and constitutional. Let's break that down.
Firstly, South Korea simply lacks the sheer fiscal capacity to guarantee $350 billion in government-backed investment.
They just don't have the cash flow.
It's more than that. To put that staggering figure into perspective for our listeners, that amount actually exceeds 80% of its current foreign exchange reserve.
50% of their reserve.
Over 80%. Imagine a single government pledge potentially consuming the vast majority of a nation's emergency financial safety net.
That sounds incredibly risky.
It is. Such a colossal commitment by the government would not just be an immense strain, it could fundamentally destabilize their national finances. This raises a critical question. How could any democratic government in Korea legitimately commit such a vast amount of public funds without broad public consensus and, crucially, without proper constitutional backing?
Which brings us to the constitutional part.
Exactly. This brings us directly to a major constitutional hurdle, Article 60 of the Korean Constitution.
Article 50, what does it say?
This article explicitly requires National Assembly approval for such large-scale government commitments that burden the national treasury. It's not a mere formality. It ensures legislative oversight and democratic accountability for significant financial outlays.
So the president can't just decide this alone?
Absolutely not. The executive branch cannot unilaterally decide to put the nation's treasury on the line like that. Furthermore, the exact fund operation model adopted by Japan, where South Korea would bear 100% of the risk for only a partial small share of any profits.
The 90-10 split after principle.
Right. That model is deemed entirely unacceptable by Seoul. It's seen as not only economically unsound, but politically untenable, inviting severe domestic backlash and undermining fiscal responsibility. This comparison of negotiation strategies really illuminates South Korea's firm stance.
So the core takeaway here is that while the public announcement of a big investment number might generate positive headlines internationally, the underlying structure of who bears the risk and responsibility fundamentally transforms the very nature and impact of the deal, distinguishing dramatically between government-backed and corporate-led commitments.
Precisely. It's the difference between a government acting as a strategic facilitator, maybe creating a favorable global environment for its private sector's ambitions, and a government directly underwriting those private sector ventures, with all the associated financial and profound political risks that such an undertaking entails. This distinction can quite literally define a nation's fiscal future and its political stability.
We've thoroughly explored the international negotiation stage and the contrasting models of investment. But these multi-billion-dollar pledges, no matter how they're structured, never exist in a vacuum, do they?
Not at all.
They have profound and often difficult domestic implications, especially within a vibrant democracy like South Korea, where the government is inherently accountable to its citizens, and every won spent overseas is a one not spent at home.
That's exactly right. To help illustrate this domestic reality, let's imagine Ji-eun, a sharp junior aide working for an opposition party lawmaker in South Korea's National Assembly.
Okay, Ji-eun, the aide.
Right. Her desk is perpetually piled high with budget reports, demographic studies, constituent mail, all that stuff.
I can picture it.
So when she hears about a proposed $350 billion investment figure being discussed in Washington, it's not just some abstract number floated by diplomats. For Ji-yeon, that number immediately translates into tangible domestic programs that would inevitably be at risk, cut, or severely delayed to fund such an immense overseas pledge.
Like what kind of programs?
She sees the potential sacrifice. The crucial funding allocated for a new high-speed rail line connecting underserved provincial cities, maybe the desperately needed budget increase for elder care in Korea's rapidly aging society.
Which is a huge issue there.
Huge. Or the vital subsidies for struggling small business owners in her boss's electoral district, many of whom are already teetering on the brink.
So real impacts on real people.
Absolutely. Ji-eun regularly sits in on frantic, closed-door strategy meetings where seasoned lawmakers are genuinely torn. They understand the immense diplomatic pressure. They know that directly opposing a major deal with their country's most important security ally, the United States, could get them branded as anti-American.
Right, the political fallout.
And potentially jeopardize the National Security Alliance.
Sure.
But they also keenly feel their direct accountability to the voters.
The people who elected them.
Exactly. Approving a government guarantee of that magnitude without clear constitutional or parliamentary mandate could trigger a severe fiscal crisis and be seen as a profound betrayal of the very citizens who elected them to improve daily lives at home, not to fund factories overseas with taxpayer money. This truly is the heart of the domestic challenge, a constant, intense pressure to balance their country's most important alliance against its own domestic future with direct, tangible impacts on the daily lives of millions of Korean citizens.
That truly highlights the incredibly difficult balancing act facing South Korean policymakers. This brings us to a crucial question. How much actual power does the South Korean executive, the president, truly wield to make such a sweeping financial commitment without the direct blessing of the legislature, the National Assembly? After all, it's a robust democracy, not an autocracy.
That's a fundamentally important point, and it's where South Korea's democratic framework really comes into play. Unlike some political systems where the executive might have more unilateral power, South Korea's structure, while certainly granting significant authority to the executive and bureaucracy, still enshrines the National Assembly with critical budgetary control.
Budgetary control, that sounds key.
It is. The Constitution, specifically Article 54, is very clear. It mandates that the National Assembly deliberates and, most importantly, decides upon the national budget bill.
Decides, not just advises.
Decides. The executive branch formulates and submits it, but the Assembly must approve it. And there's another key detail in Article 57. The National Assembly cannot even increase an expenditure item or propose a new one without the executive's consent.
Interesting. So it's a two-way street, sort of.
Exactly. This dynamic creates a fascinating, almost delicate dance of power and represents a significant constitutional hurdle for any large-scale government-backed pledges, particularly those approaching the magnitude of $350 billion. This framework is explicitly designed to prevent an executive from overspending or committing vast national resources without broad legislative buy-in and oversight.
And we know that South Korea currently operates under a split government, with President Lee Jae-myung from the liberal DPK, the Democratic Party of Korea, and the legislative branch, the National Assembly, potentially controlled by a conservative opposition.
That's right.
This political dynamic could lead to substantial stalemates on such a massive financial decision, couldn't it?
Absolutely. The current political landscape with a split government makes this situation even more precarious. Political gridlock is not just a theoretical possibility. It's a very real and often frustrating reality in such a scenario.
Yeah, we see that in many democracies.
It directly impacts the government's ability to push through major financial commitments, especially those that could be perceived as controversial, fiscally burdensome, or ideologically misaligned with the opposition's priorities.
So the opposition could just say no?
They certainly could scrutinize it intensely. The legislative review process is emphatically not a mere rubber stamp in South Korea. It's a powerful mechanism for checks and balances, and the opposition would undoubtedly analyze any such proposal, potentially stalling or even blocking it entirely.
Right.
This adds an immense layer of domestic political complexity to an already challenging international negotiation.
So let's consider the broader picture. If the South Korean government were to proceed and guarantee $350 billion, what would be the comprehensive fiscal implications for the nation's financial health, its long-term stability, and its economic future?
Well, the fiscal implications would be profound. While Korea, unlike many other developed nations, does not have formalized, legally binding fiscal rules, meaning explicit statutory limits on debt or deficits.
They don't have debt ceilings like the U.S.
Not in the same formalized legal way, no, but it does operate under informal but strict national guidelines designed to maintain fiscal discipline.
Okay, informal rules.
Right. The government has publicly targeted a managed fiscal deficit within 3% of GDP starting from 2025, and it aims to keep its government debt to GDP ratio around 50% by 2028.
So they do have targets.
Oh, yes, definitely. Total government expenditure growth is also deliberately set at a moderate 3.2% for 2025, reflecting a cautious fiscal approach. In 2023, South Korea's government debt to GDP was approximately 28.9%.
How does that compare?
Well, it's notably lower than, for instance, Japan's 34.4% at that time, and also lower than some measures of U.S. debt, though comparisons can be tricky. But the key point is the sheer size of a $350 billion commitment relative to their economy and reserves.
The 80% of reserves figure again.
Exactly, especially when you consider it represents more than 80% of their entire foreign exchange reserves. This isn't just another line item in the budget, it's a potential game changer that could significantly alter their national finances and trajectory.
This sounds like South Korea is truly at a critical crossroads, facing not just immediate pressures, but also significant long-term economic and demographic shifts that make these decisions even more weighty.
Precisely. The country is grappling with rapid and unprecedented demographic changes, characterized by an aging population that is growing at an alarming rate and persistently low birth rates, which are among the lowest in the world.
The aging society, low birth rate challenge, we hear a lot about that.
It's a huge challenge.
Oh.
This demographic time bomb, coupled with declining economic vitality stemming from persistently low growth rates, means the government's fiscal role is expected to become increasingly vital in the coming years.
They need more government spending, not less.
Arguably, yes. They'll need to support a growing elderly population, invest in future-proof industries, and maintain social services. Therefore, South Korea is at a very clear crossroads. Either it successfully manages to maintain a prosperous equilibrium with its historically low public debt, which has been a cornerstone of its economic stability and success, or it risks sliding into a situation with much higher public debt and significantly less fiscal flexibility to address these pressing domestic and demographic issues.
And this deal could push them that way.
A massive, government-backed overseas investment, particularly one of this scale, would undoubtedly complicate this delicate balance, potentially pushing them towards the less desirable path of higher debt and less flexibility.
Given these existing and projected fiscal pressures, the idea of committing to a massive government-backed investment, particularly an overseas one, seems even more fraught with challenges.
Indeed. There's an ongoing, crucial, and often contentious debate within Korea about introducing formal statutory fiscal rules.
Like the ones they don't currently have.
Exactly. While many experts recommend establishing these rules in law for the sake of greater market credibility and long-term fiscal sustainability, the initiative faces significant hurdles.
Such as?
Well, legislative delays, strong political incentives that often favor short-term spending decisions over long-term discipline, and the inherent challenges of designing flexible escape clauses to allow for necessary government action during unforeseen economic shocks.
Right. You need flexibility for crises.
You do. Yet the consensus among fiscal experts is clear. Such rules are probably essential for the long term. Moreover, there's a widely recognized need for significant domestic reforms across several critical areas. The public pension system, which is facing demographic pressures.
Pensions are always tough.
The national health insurance scheme, which needs sustainable funding, and broader revenue mobilization strategies, for instance. Proposals to raise the value-added tax, VAT, a consumption tax, from its current 10% to 15%, or to lower the income threshold for the top tax rate.
So tax hikes and spending cuts are already on the table domestically.
They're being seriously discussed. All of these existing substantial fiscal pressures would be severely exacerbated, potentially to a breaking point, by a massive government-backed overseas investment. It's a complex equation with many domestic variables already straining the budget.
And the president's own term limits add yet another layer of complexity to foreign policymaking. It makes it incredibly challenging to solidify long-term international commitments that demand sustained domestic buy-in.
That's a very keen and crucial observation. A single 5-year presidential term in South Korea creates quite pronounced and distinct stages for foreign policy, a dynamic quite different from parliamentary systems or those with longer presidential terms.
Only 5 years and you're done.
Right. There's a significant fallout for foreign policymaking after the third year because the final 2 years of an administration are often largely consumed by the internal political maneuvering of finding and promoting a successor.
The lame duck effect, basically?
Something like that, yeah. This leaves a relatively short window for any administration to effectively push through complex, long-term foreign policy changes that truly require substantial domestic consensus and legislative buy-in.
Makes sense.
This inherent political cycle makes achieving stability and continuity in major foreign policy initiatives, particularly those with vast financial implications, quite challenging.
And in a vibrant democracy like South Korea, public opinion plays an ever-increasing and often decisive role in shaping these significant government decisions, not just electoral outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. The role of civil society in South Korea is continuously expanding, and public disapproval of executive-level economic policies has been historically significant.
You have examples?
Well, for instance, during a previous administration, changes to key economic and labor market policies were met with strong disapproval from 62% of the public, which directly led to a sharp and sustained decline in the president's popularity rating.
62% disapproval, that's high.
It is. This historical precedent clearly suggests that financially burdensome deals, especially if they are perceived as sacrificing critical domestic needs for overseas commitments, could face a very strong and politically damaging public backlash.
People might ask why we're sending money abroad when we need it here.
Exactly. Such a reaction would further restrict the executive's leeway and ability to enact such policies, regardless of the intensity of international pressure.
So when we synthesize all these domestic realities, the constitutional constraints, the fiscal pressures, the political gridlock, and the power of public opinion, what does this tell us about the ultimate constraints on foreign policy, even for the most powerful executives?
What this truly tells us as we connect these threads to the broader tapestry is that even in high-stakes international negotiations, domestic politics and profound fiscal realities play an enormous, often unseen, and ultimately decisive role.
Domestic factors can override international ones.
They often do, or at least heavily shape them. A president, even with the best intentions for alliances, cannot simply promise the nation's treasury away without first surviving the rigorous scrutiny of the people's representatives and profoundly considering the direct impact on the daily lives and welfare of their constituents. It's a powerful and ever-present reminder that foreign policy is always, in every meaningful sense, inextricably linked to domestic policy.
We've thoroughly navigated the complexities of international negotiation models and South Korea's intricate domestic, political, and fiscal challenges. Now, let's shift our focus to a critical, yet often frustratingly overlooked, element that can truly make or break these massive investment deals: the indispensable role of human capital, and the frequently convoluted world of international visa policies.
Right. This is so important. To highlight just how critical this seemingly bureaucratic detail can be, let's consider the story of Mr. Park, a brilliant top project manager for a leading Korean battery manufacturer.
Okay, Mr. Park, the battery expert.
Exactly. His company had just invested over $2 billion to construct a state-of-the-art electric vehicle battery plant in the American Midwest.
$2 billion. Big investment.
Huge. The gleaming new building was complete, the advanced robotics were meticulously installed, but the production line was inexplicably iterating at less than 40% efficiency.
Less than 40%.
Yeah.
Why? What went wrong?
The problem: Mr. Park was stuck in Seoul. He and his core team of 5 elite engineers, the absolute only people on Earth who truly understood the company's proprietary, cutting-edge manufacturing processes and complex calibration protocols.
The key people weren't there.
They couldn't get there. They had their L1 visa applications rejected.
The L1, that's for internal company transfers, right?
Correct. It's a non-immigrant visa specifically for intra-company transferees coming from an overseas office to a U.S. office, often requiring specialized knowledge.
And they were rejected. On what grounds?
The official reason cited for their rejection was, ironically, a lack of specialized knowledge.
Lack of specialized knowledge.
Yeah.
But they were the specialists.
Exactly. These were the very specialists who had invented the process and knew it inside and out. So every single day, Mr. Park is on agonizing 2 a.m. video calls, desperately trying to walk American technicians through highly complex calibrations on intricate machinery located half a world away.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Mistakes are inevitable, delays pile up exponentially, and millions of dollars are being lost each week. This multi-billion-dollar investment, envisioned as a triumph of international partnership, is effectively jeopardized.
By visa problems.
Not by a lack of funds or technology, but by critical personnel caught in an intractable bureaucratic visa limbo. It's a multi-billion-dollar project brought to its knees by paperwork. Basically, multi-billion-dollar paperweights.
Multi-billion-dollar paperweights. Wow. That anecdote truly brings home the problem, putting a very human and tangible face on what can often seem like an abstract policy issue. Korea has historically relied quite heavily on short-term visas for its skilled workers to establish and optimize manufacturing sites in the U.S. for years. But your point suggests that policy landscape appears to be shifting, and not for the better.
Indeed, that reliance is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Recent U.S. actions, such as a highly publicized raid in Georgia where Korean workers were accused of illegal crossings or expired visas, starkly highlight a hardening stance from U.S. immigration authorities.
A raid on Korean work?
Yes. And this incident, notably, occurred less than 2 weeks after South Korea had already pledged $350 billion in investments to the U.S.
That sends a weird message.
Sending what could only be described as a very mixed and confusing signal to his allies. It's indicative of a broader, more restrictive trend. Hiring immigrant labor, particularly for specialized roles, is demonstrably becoming harder in 2025. Furthermore, changing H-1B visa regulations, the H-1B being a non-immigrant visa that allows U.S. employers to temporarily employ foreign workers in specialty occupations, mean that businesses must now be far more strategic and, frankly, more cautious about recruiting specialized talent from other regions.
So H-1B is getting tougher, too.
Complicating what was once a more straightforward process for deploying essential personnel.
So when we consider these increasingly restrictive visa policies, what are the broader economic implications for international trade and foreign direct investment more generally? Is there a quantifiable economic impact beyond these compelling individual stories?
Absolutely. There is a very tangible and significant economic impact. If we connect this to the broader economic picture, empirical research consistently confirms that visa restrictions significantly hamper personal contact.
Makes sense. Harder to meet, harder to do deals.
Exactly. Which is inherently detrimental to both international trade and foreign direct investment, or FDI, which is when a company invests directly in business operations in a foreign country, rather than just buying shares.
Right, FDI.
Studies have rigorously shown that unilateral visa restrictions imposed by one country can reduce bilateral trade with the affected nation by up to 19%.
19%? That's a lot.
And foreign direct investment by a substantial 25%. Even if both countries impose reciprocal restrictions, the negative effect on trade is still around 25%, and FDI remains similarly impacted, also around 25%.
Wow, 25% hit on investment.
While these effects are somewhat smaller than those observed on general tourism or travel, they are still substantial enough to make a very significant difference to national economies, impacting growth, innovation, and global competitiveness. It's not a minor friction, it's a major drag on economic activity and collaboration.
So why is that the case? Why do these seemingly bureaucratic restrictions exert such a strong and measurable economic impact on trade and investment flows?
Well, the fundamental reason is multifaceted. Firstly, visa restrictions significantly raise both the direct financial costs and the often underestimated logistical hassle of international travel.
Yeah, visas can be a real pain.
Right. This makes it considerably harder for businesses to genuinely discover and fully capitalize on mutually beneficial economic opportunities. Business partners often like perfect information about potential gains, and these valuable insights are frequently only discovered and developed after direct personal contact, multiple site visits, or extended collaboration.
You need face-to-face sometimes.
Often, yes. Secondly, and particularly crucial for industries like high-tech manufacturing, the direct personal transfer of highly specialized knowledge, proprietary processes, and essential management oversight is absolutely indispensable for this successful setup and sustained operation of complex projects.
Like Mr. Park's battery plant.
Exactly. You simply cannot just ship a blueprint or a user manual and expect full functionality. You need the actual people who understand how to execute, troubleshoot, and optimize it on the ground.
Makes sense.
There's also the point that visa policies are often employed as a blunt instrument for addressing national security concerns.
A blunt instrument.
Yeah. While well-intentioned, they tend to deter a vast number of valuable visitors who would bring significant economic, cultural, and intellectual benefits, yet they don't always effectively stop those they are explicitly intended to keep out.
Right. It catches the wrong people sometimes.
A historical example illustrating this is the 9/11 terrorists, who, for instance, entered the U.S. on valid visas, demonstrating the limitations of such broad restrictions. For South Korean companies establishing advanced manufacturing facilities, the inability to swiftly deploy their specialized engineers and managers is not just an inconvenience. It can be a fundamental barrier to operational success, turning potential profits into protracted losses.
Given this significant economic and operational impact, it becomes abundantly clear that South Korea's demand for dedicated professional visa quotas isn't merely a minor diplomatic point or a bargaining chip. It's a fundamental and absolute prerequisite for these proposed investments to make any kind of economic or strategic sense.
It absolutely is. This raises a paramount question. Can a multi-billion-dollar investment truly succeed and deliver its promised benefits without first ensuring that the critical human element, the specialized talent, is securely in place?
Probably not, based on Mr. Park's story.
Right. South Korea's position is unequivocal. Securing dedicated professional visa quotas for its essential personnel is a non-negotiable condition for the successful implementation, operational continuity, and ultimately the profitability of these massive investments.
But what are they asking for specifically?
They propose concrete pathways. Either the U.S. Congress legislates specific allocated quotas for Korean professionals, or the U.S. president issues an executive order explicitly addressing these visa quotas directly within the framework of the agreement itself.
So a guaranteed legal pathway.
Exactly. Without this clear, legally assured pathway for essential Korean engineers, managers, and technical specialists, these massive investments, much like Mr. Park's state-of-the-art factory, are at grave risk of becoming nothing more than multi-billion-dollar paperweights.
Paperweights again, that's a stark image.
They would be impressive structures, brimming with potential, but largely unproductive and economically disappointing, underscoring the profound interconnectedness of immigration policy and robust economic strategy.
So if we distill all this down, what's the essential insight for our listeners from this discussion on human capital and visa policy?
The essential insight is this. Capital investment, while crucial, is only one piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle. The free and efficient flow of human capital, especially individuals possessing specialized knowledge and critical skills, is equally, if not more, vital for the success of any ambitious international venture.
Money isn't enough. You need the people.
Absolutely. This highlights a fundamental truth about modern global economics. Investments are not just about pouring concrete and buying machines. They are, at their core, about people, their ingenuity, their expertise, and their ability to bring projects to life. Without the skilled individuals to implement projects, transfer critical knowledge, and manage complex operations, even the most ambitious financial deals can crumble, underscoring the deep and often underestimated interconnectedness of immigration policy and economic strategy.
We've thoroughly laid out this incredibly complex landscape, traversing from the intricate world of international negotiation models to the deep-seated domestic pressures within South Korea, and finally to the vital, yet often frustrating human element of visa policies. Now let's turn our attention to the potential endgame. If the U.S. does not budge on South Korea's crucial conditions, specifically the corporate-led investment model and the critical visa quotas, what tangible leverage does South Korea actually possess? What are the practical consequences of a breakdown in these high-stakes negotiations?
Right, the leverage question. The South Korean government has been quite explicit and firm in its stance. They've stated clearly that if the U.S. doesn't accept these fundamental conditions, or if negotiations continue to be perceived as unreasonable and predatory, they are fully prepared to break this deadlock.
Break the deadlock. Strong words. Is that just talk?
Well, this isn't just diplomatic rhetoric. There are very tangible and potentially costly consequences for both sides if these negotiations ultimately fail.
So let's explore that. What exactly are the stakes for South Korea if these crucial negotiations fall apart and no mutually agreeable resolution is reached?
Okay, for South Korea, a breakdown in these talks would mean its vital automotive and parts exports to the U.S. market would likely face tariffs 10% higher than those currently applied to Japan and the European Union.
10% higher tariffs on cars.
Yeah.
That would hurt Hyundai and Kia badly.
It would undeniably and significantly impact the price competitiveness of Korean vehicles and components in a market that is absolutely crucial for their economy. Major players like Hyundai and Kia could see their market share eroded, impacting jobs and revenue back home.
Okay, so that's a big downside for them.
It is. However, the South Korean government also makes a very astute counter-argument. They contend that spending $350 billion of taxpayers' money, an immense sum simply to support the auto industry's export competitiveness in the U.S., might in fact have more effective and fiscally responsible domestic alternatives for revitalizing the broader Korean economy.
Ah, the opportunity cost argument. Maybe that money is better spent at home.
Exactly. This forces a critical reevaluation. Is propping up an alliance or one industry's export competitiveness worse the potential strain on national resources and the sacrifice of other pressing domestic priorities, especially given the fiscal pressures we've discussed?
Yeah.
It demands a tough calculation of national interest.
That's a powerful argument about prioritizing domestic economic health. But what about the United States? Does South Korea hold any meaningful leverage over them? Or is this a completely one-sided negotiation where Washington holds all the cards?
No, this is definitely not a unilateral power dynamic. South Korea absolutely holds significant leverage, and it stems directly from its critical and often indispensable role in several strategic global industries.
Like what? What leverage do they have?
Well, for instance, if these negotiations were to break down, the U.S. would have to abandon its dream of rebuilding the shipbuilding industry.
Shipbuilding? Real?
Yes. This statement implies that Korean expertise, advanced technology, or crucial supply chain components are not merely beneficial, but are absolutely vital and irreplaceable to specific U.S. strategic economic goals, such as revitalizing key industrial sectors or bolstering defense capabilities.
So the U.S. needs Korean help for its own industrial goals.
It seems so, particularly in certain sectors. Korean shipyards are global leaders in complex vessel construction, including things like LNG carriers and advanced naval ships. And without that partnership, the U.S. faces significant hurdles in achieving its own industrial ambitions.
Interesting. So it cuts both ways.
It does. Both sides genuinely have something significant to lose, which creates a very real impetus for compromise, making it a much more balanced negotiation than it might appear on the surface.
One final thought on how South Korea might strategically approach this internally, especially given all the domestic pressures and political complexities we've discussed.
Right. Given the inherently highly charged and complex nature of these negotiations, which touch on national security, economic prosperity, and diplomatic relations, there's a widely recognized and increasingly urgent need for a nonpartisan, trans-party response within South Korea to U.S. diplomacy.
Unity across party lines. Is that realistic?
It's seen as necessary. This isn't just about political niceties. It reflects the deep domestic political challenges of trying to align often conflicting national security interests with immediate economic realities and volatile public opinion. Such critical foreign policy decisions, especially those with immense fiscal and long-term economic implications, truly demand a unified national front. If they become fodder for internal political battles, it weakens Korea's negotiating position internationally and risks protracted domestic instability,
Yeah.
further highlighting the deep interplay between internal politics and external diplomacy.
What an incredibly detailed deep dive into the real-world complexities behind international trade and investment agreements. We've journeyed from the high-level negotiation rooms to the desks of diligent government aides and the state-of-the-art production floors of cutting-edge factories.
It's quite a journey.
We've meticulously seen how contrasting negotiation styles, like Japan's government-backed approach versus the EU's corporate-led but still controversial model, fundamentally dictate risk and responsibility, often with profound consequences.
The models really matter.
We've also uncovered the deep-seated domestic challenges South Korea faces, from the very real constitutional hurdles and pressing fiscal realities to the imperative of navigating unpredictable public opinion and political gridlock.
The domestic angle is huge.
And perhaps most surprisingly, we vividly highlighted the make-or-break role of human capital, where a few visa approvals or rejections can literally determine the success or failure of multi-billion-dollar ventures.
Those paperweights.
Exactly, the multi-billion-dollar paperweights.
These layers of intricacy serve as a powerful reminder that there is always, always more to learn beneath the surface of the headlines. What might initially seem like a straightforward financial commitment often conceals complex layers of political strategy, deep economic constraint, and the very human stories of individuals and companies caught within the vast global machinery.
Yeah.
It's a profound lesson in how deeply intertwined global and local realities truly are, and how even the smallest details can have monumental consequences.